I didn't believe churches could feel abandoned the way forests do. But the one I visited that night, it didn't feel empty. It felt paused, like the entire building had stopped mid-breath, waiting for something to continue that never would. The road leading there was narrow, swallowed by thick fog that clung to my windshield like wet paper. My headlights kept catching broken fences, tilted crosses, and trees that leaned inward as if listening. Even the air felt wrong, too still, too heavy, like sound itself was being held back. When I finally stepped out of the car, the church bell above the entrance gave a soft, single creak, though there was no wind. The doors were already slightly open, as if someone had just gone inside and forgot to close them. Inside, the air was colder than it should have been, carrying a faint scent of wax and damp stone. My footsteps didn't echo the way they should have. They just disappeared. And then I noticed something strange. Every candle inside the church was already lit, not flickering, not burning down, just steady, pale flames that didn't seem to consume anything. That's when I realized I wasn't alone in there, because somewhere deep in the dark aisle, something shifted, like it had been watching me long before I arrived. And that's when I saw it, late autumn, somewhere between towns that no longer felt real. The road had been empty for hours. Fog rested low against the asphalt, brushing the tires like cold breath. My headlights carved narrow tunnels through it, then swallowed themselves again. The GPS flickered, a soft electronic hum. Then silence. Then the screen reset to its loading circle. I slowed the car. Fields stretched on both sides, dark, unmoving, smelling faintly of wet soil and distant rain. No houses, no power lines, only wind passing through dry grass in uneven whispers. The GPS restarted, and for a moment, a structure appeared on the map, a small gray icon, unlabeled. Then it vanished. Ahead, through the fog, something rose from the darkness. A church. I almost drove past it. It stood too close to the road, as if it had stepped forward while I wasn't looking. Stone walls pale under moonlight, tall windows black and empty. No lights inside, no parking lot, no path leading toward it, just a building, waiting. I checked the GPS again. The screen froze. Reset. Blank map. Each time the church entered my view, the device restarted like it refused to acknowledge what stood there. Curiosity pulled harder than caution. I parked along the shoulder. The engine ticked quietly as it cooled. Cold air slipped inside when I opened the door, carrying the smell of damp wood and something older like forgotten basements. Gravel crunched beneath my shoes. The church looked ordinary at first glance. But when I blinked, the tower seemed taller, the windows narrower. I stopped walking, looked away toward the road, looked back. The entrance had shifted slightly to the left. Not moved, just different. My breath fog in front of me. Every time my eyes left the building, something small changed. The angle of the roof, the spacing of the stones. Even the color felt subtly wrong. Gray becoming pale blue, then old bone white, like memory failing to settle on one version. The wooden doors stood half open. No wind pushed them. They simply waited. Inside, darkness pooled thick and cool. The air carried a faint sweetness, wax, dust, and something metallic beneath it. I stepped in. The temperature dropped immediately. Sound softened, as if wrapped in cloth. Even my footsteps felt quieter, swallowed by the floorboards. Rows of pews stretched forward, empty. A pale light filtered through stained glass, though I couldn't see any source outside. Particles drifted lazily in the air, brushing my face like invisible threads. And then I noticed the portraits. They lined the walls between the windows. Dozens of them, oil paintings in heavy frames. Faces staring outward. Strangers, men, women, children. Different clothing from different decades. Different expressions, calm, tired, expectant. I moved closer. Dust clung to the glass. My reflection overlapped theirs. Something tightened in my chest. The resemblance wasn't exact, but it was close enough to unsettle. Each face shared something with mine. The same eyes, the same jawline, the same faint crease near the mouth, like variations of a person imagined by someone who almost remembered me. I stepped back. The air shifted. A hymn began, soft, distant, No organ, no choir. The melody seeped from nowhere at all, vibrating faintly through the wooden pews beneath my fingertips. At first it sounded familiar, comforting even. Then I realized the notes were wrong. The hymn played backward, words folded into themselves, syllables dragged unnaturally, like breath being pulled back in the lungs instead of released. The sound pressed against my ears, not loud but unavoidable. My skin prickled. I turned slowly, searching for speakers, musicians, anything human. Nothing moved. The church remained empty. Yet the hymn continued, reversing time one note at a time. The portraits seemed closer now. I couldn't remember walking nearer to them. Their painted eyes followed gently, patiently, waiting for recognition. I faced the entrance again. The doors were still open, but the outside looked dimmer than before, the fog thicker, the road harder to see. For a moment, I wondered if hours had passed. The hymn slowed. Each backward note stretched longer than the last, then stopped. Silence fell heavily, pressing against my ears until I could hear my own pulse. I realized something else. The church no longer looked the same as when I entered. The ceiling arched higher, the aisle longer, the shadows deeper, as if the building adjusted itself while I wasn't paying attention. I swallowed. The air felt aware, not hostile, not welcoming, just attentive. Behind me, one of the portraits creaked softly against the wall. I didn't turn around. I already knew what I would see. Another face almost like mine. Another version waiting patiently in paint and dust. Outside, the GPS of my car rebooted again, its faint electronic chime barely reaching through the doorway, trying and failing to place this church anywhere in the world. I stood alone in the pale light, breath slow, hands cold, and for the first time, a thought arrived quietly, gently. This place wasn't lost. It simply wasn't meant to be found. The silence deepened. Somewhere above me, unseen, would settle with a tired sigh, and the church seemed to notice that I had arrived. It was almost midnight when I noticed the clock. There hadn't been one before. A small brass clock hung beside the altar now, its hands trembling just before 12. The ticking felt heavy, each second landing inside my chest instead of the air. The church remained still. Dust hovered unmoving. Candles burned without flicker. Even the fog outside the windows looked paused, pressed flat against the glass. I checked my phone. No signal. Battery frozen at the same number it had shown since arriving. 11:59. The silence deepened. My breathing sounded too loud, too human for this place. I tried to slow it, matching the rhythm of the room. Then the bell rang. One clean strike. It didn't echo outward. It dropped downward, like a weight sinking through water. Midnight. The vibration traveled through the floorboards into my legs, through bone, through teeth, and something changed. The pew closest to the front shifted slightly. I blinked. Someone was sitting there. I hadn't heard footsteps. No door opened. No movement approached. The figure simply existed now. Head lowered, hands folded. Still, I turned slowly. Another person sat 2 rows back. Then another, clothing from different eras. Dark coats, pale dresses, worn suits, all facing forward. No one entered, yet attendance grew. Every time I looked away, another seat filled. Breath caught in my throat. The air cooled further, carrying faint smells. Old perfume, damp wool, extinguished candles. Layers of presence pressing around me. None of them moved. No blinking. No shifting posture. Only quiet waiting. I stepped into the aisle. My footsteps sounded wrong, like walking across memory instead of wood. No heads turned toward me. I wasn't acknowledged. Not yet. The bell's vibration lingered long after the strike ended. Then I noticed the lectern near the altar. A large wooden ledger rested upon it. I was certain it hadn't been there before. Its cover looked ancient, cracked leather, edges softened by countless hands. A pen lay beside it. Black ink pooled at its tip. I approached slowly. The congregation remained motionless behind me, though I felt their awareness gather like cold fog against my back. The ledger opened. By itself, pages flipped gently, stopping near the middle. Columns of names filled every line. dates beside them, times, all marked exactly at midnight. The pen lifted. No hand touched it. Ink gathered at the nib, trembling in the air. Then it began to write, scratching softly across paper. Letters formed slowly. My name, each stroke deliberate, careful, inevitable. I stepped back. The pen continued without pause, adding today's date beneath it. The pressure dented the page as if an invisible hand pressed firmly downward. I reached out. The pen stopped instantly. The entire church felt like it inhaled. I withdrew my hand. The pen resumed writing. A final mark appeared beside my name. Attendance confirmed. The ledger closed gently. Behind me, fabric rustled in perfect unison. I turned. Every figure now faced slightly toward me. Not fully, just enough. I couldn't see their eyes clearly, yet I felt them settling on me, recognizing something long expected. Confusion rose first. Had I fallen asleep somewhere? Was this exhaustion? A dream refusing to break? Fear followed quietly, because dreams do not feel this cold, do not smell like dust and age, do not vibrate through bone. One figure near the aisle shifted, a slow, unnatural motion, as though remembering how humans sit. I waited for footsteps. None came. No breathing reached my ears. The church held its congregation perfectly still, yet undeniably present. The bell tower creaked above. Midnight had begun something, and I understood without knowing how. This was attendance, not gathering, not arrival, recognition. I looked back toward the entrance. The doors were closed now. I didn't remember them shutting. The brass clock ticked again. 12:01. No one left. No one spoke. The congregation simply remained complete. And somewhere deep inside me, disbelief settled into something heavier. I had not wandered into a service. I had been counted. I noticed them only when I stopped breathing. The balcony above the nave had been empty moments ago. Now figures stood along the railing. A choir, robes pale and colorless, blending into shadow and light. Hands folded, heads slightly raised. Waiting. I listened. Nothing. No footsteps climbing stairs. No rustle of fabric. They had appeared the same way as the congregation, without transition. Their mouths open together. Perfect synchronization. But no sound came. The silence felt wrong, because something still reached me. A vibration, soft at first, like distant thunder beneath the floor. It moved upward through my shoes, into my legs, into my ribs. My bones hummed. The choir continued singing, without voices. Each movement of their mouths sent pulses through the air. Pressure waves felt rather than heard. My teeth ached faintly. The wooden pew beside me trembled. I pressed a hand against my chest. The rhythm matched a melody I could not hear. The hymn existed inside the body instead of the ears. Words formed in my mind without sound. Not thoughts, lyrics. Lines appeared fully shaped, as though remembered from childhood despite never learning them. Verses describing places I had never been. Events not yet lived. Rain falling on roads I would travel. Conversations I had not spoken. Lonely rooms waiting somewhere ahead of my life. My stomach tightened. The choir was singing the future. Their mouths moved faster. The vibrations grew stronger. Images surfaced involuntarily. Flashes behind my eyes. A hospital hallway. An unfamiliar apartment. Snow falling against a window I did not recognize. Each line felt inevitable. The congregation below remained frozen, receiving the hymn without reaction. I staggered slightly as another verse passed through me. Pain flickered behind my temples. Then the melody slowed. The choir turned their faces toward me, every mouth moving only for me now. The next line formed carefully, clearer than the others. It described a night, a church, a figure standing alone beneath pale light. Me, my breath shook. The hymn continued. It described my fear, my confusion, the exact way my hands trembled. Then the final verse began. The vibration deepened until it felt unbearable. My vision blurred. Words assembled slowly, reluctantly, a description of my death. The imagery arrived piece by piece. Cold stone, stillness, silence closing inward. My heart pounded violently. The choir leaned forward slightly, mouths shaping the final sentence. And then they stopped. All movement ceased at once. The last line unfinished. The vibration vanished. Silence returned, so suddenly my ears rang. The choir froze mid-expression, mouths slightly open as if paused between breaths. The unfinished lyric hung invisibly in the air. I waited for the ending. None came. The congregation below remained unmoving. The brass clock ticked softly again. I realized the hymn had not ended. It had paused, waiting for something yet to happen, or something yet to be decided. A faint chill passed over me. The choir slowly closed their mouths. Their heads lowered together. The balcony dimmed, and though they remained visible, they felt distant now, like figures remembered after waking from a dream. I understood then. My death had been written, but not completed. The church was still listening. The candles near the altar burned steadily, too steadily. No flicker despite the cold air moving through the nave. One candle drew my attention. Its flame leaned sideways. Toward me, I stepped left. The flame followed. A thin thread of heat brushed my skin. I stopped moving. The flame steadied, facing directly toward my chest. Watching, the realization came slowly. The candle was aware. My pulse quickened. The flame brightened instantly. Wax began dripping upward, not melting downward, but rising along the candle's body like reverse gravity. Liquid gold climbing toward the wick. I stared, unable to look away. Inside the flame, shapes formed. Reflections, not of the church around me. Other places. Another version of the nave, empty, abandoned. Another where every pew overflowed with figures. Another where I stood older, shoulders bent, staring back at myself. The images shifted each time fear tightened in my chest. The flame grew brighter with every anxious breath. Light expanded across the walls, pushing shadows backward. I felt exposed, seen completely. I forced myself to calm down. The flame dimmed slightly. It reacted to emotion, fed on fear. I stepped closer. Heat brushed my face, carrying a faint scent of burning paper. Within the fire, another reality appeared. I saw myself leaving the church, walking into morning light. Relief filled me. The flame flared violently, nearly blinding. The image vanished, replaced by darkness swallowing the doorway instead. Hope had changed the vision. My hands trembled. The candle tilted again, tracking me precisely. No matter where I stood, it followed. The church around me faded into shadow, while the flame became the brightest thing in existence. My reflection appeared within it again. This time I wasn't alone. Figures stood behind me. I turned sharply. No one there. When I faced the flame again, the reflection showed them closer. Waiting. Fear surged uncontrollably. The flame roared higher, stretching unnaturally tall. Light filled the church like interrogation. The walls seemed to lean inward. I stepped back instinctively. The flame calmed, dimmed, satisfied. It understood my limits. I realized then, the candle wasn't merely observing. It was learning how fear worked, testing responses, adjusting brightness like a living eye dilating in darkness. The wax continued flowing upward endlessly. Time felt suspended around its glow. Finally, I turned away. The flame remained fixed on my back, warmth pressing between my shoulders. Even without looking, I knew it still watched. And somewhere deep inside the church, something else had begun watching too. The confessional stood along the far wall. I did not remember seeing it before. Dark wood, curtains slightly open. Inside waited a narrow seat and deeper shadow. The air around it felt warmer, expectant. I approached slowly. Each step echoed strangely, as though replayed twice. Once now, once from long ago. I sat inside. The curtain closed behind me, without touch. Darkness wrapped close. The scent of old wood and faint incense surrounded me. Before I could speak, a voice whispered from the other side. Soft, familiar. It spoke my childhood nickname. My chest tightened. No one alive knew that name anymore. The voice began listing memories. A school hallway, a lost toy beneath a bed, a secret I never told anyone. But details were wrong. Dates shifted. Faces changed. Events almost correct yet distorted. It remembered incorrectly. I corrected one memory aloud without thinking. The church shuddered gently. Somewhere outside, what creaked as if reality adjusted itself. The voice paused, then repeated the memory again, now matching my correction. I froze. Every confession changed something. I tested it. I admitted a regret. A faint pressure moved through the air. The church exhaled. When I opened my eyes, the confessional felt slightly larger. Reality had shifted. The voice continued calmly, asking nothing, only stating truths and almost truths. With every response I gave, subtle differences crept in. The smell of incense grew stronger. The temperature warmed. Distant architecture seemed to rearrange. I realized the danger too late. Each confession rewrote the world and took something from me. When I tried recalling a childhood friend's face, it blurred. Gone. A small memory erased. Panic rose. I stood abruptly and pulled the curtain aside. The church looked mostly the same. Mostly. But something inside me felt lighter in the worst possible way. Missing pieces I could not name. Behind me, from within the confessional, the voice spoke once more. Gentle. Certain. You've been here before. I turned back. The booth stood empty. Silent. Waiting for my next confession. The altar had changed again. I was certain of it. Moments earlier, the stone wall behind it had been solid. Aged marble veined like frozen smoke. Now a narrow outline cut through the surface. A door, thin, tall, as if it had always been hidden there, waiting for permission to exist. I stared, trying to remember when it appeared. I couldn't. The church breathed quietly around me. Candles steady, congregation unmoving. No one reacted. Only I noticed. I stepped closer. The air near the altar felt heavier, warm against my face despite the cold nave. My footsteps echoed differently here. Deeper, older. The door opened before I touched it. No hinges creaked. It simply parted. Darkness waited beyond. Not empty darkness, layered darkness. Depth without end. Stone steps descended immediately, spiraling downward beyond sight. A faint draft rose from below, carrying the smell of damp earth and something ancient like caves untouched by sunlight. Curiosity pulled harder than fear. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me without sound. The stairwell swallowed the church's light almost instantly. Only a dim gray glow lingered above. Each step echoed, but every echo sounded different. A woman laughing softly, a child whispering, a tired sigh, fragments of voices belonging to strangers. I stopped walking. Another step. This echo spoke clearly. My own voice, not repeating what I said, speaking independently, finishing a sentence I hadn't begun. Cold spread through my chest. I descended further. With each step, new voices replaced the last. Hundreds layered together. Memories worn into the stone itself. And always, somewhere among them, my voice again. Waiting below. The staircase never ended. I turned back. The doorway above was still visible, but farther away than it should have been. I climbed upward quickly. The distance shortened instantly, as if the stairs rearranged to release me. When I stepped back into the church, the hidden door was gone. Only solid stone remained. No trace it had ever existed. Yet the echoes followed me faintly, especially the one that sounded exactly like me. The congregation had shifted, not dramatically, just enough to notice. Every figure now faced forward perfectly, hands resting identically upon their laps. Stillness filled the room too completely. I watched the nearest person. No breathing moved their chest. No blink softened their gaze. Eyes open, unmoving. Minutes passed. Nothing changed. A dry tension crept into my throat. I looked away toward the stained glass windows. When I turned back, they had moved closer, only slightly. A different posture, a different angle of the head. I hadn't heard movement. I watched another figure carefully, forced myself not to blink. Seconds stretched painfully. My eyes burned. The moment I glanced downward, fabric rustled behind me. I looked up again. Several figures now faced directly toward me. Fear tightened my muscles. I stepped backward. Every head turned at once. Perfect synchronization. But when I met their eyes fully, they froze. Instantly, like mannequins awaiting instruction. I tested it. I broke eye contact. Soft repositioning followed behind me. I looked back again. Stillness returned. Something inside the church was mimicking human behavior, almost correctly, but not entirely. One figure's hand bent at an unnatural angle. Another sat too upright, spine impossibly straight. They were learning, practicing stillness when observed, moving when unseen. I realized the danger. If I stopped looking, they would continue adjusting, improving. The entire congregation sat waiting, rehearsing humanity one movement at a time. And I was the reference they studied. The holy book appeared upon the altar, large, heavy, bound in pale leather that looked almost soft enough to breathe. It opened on its own. Pages turned rapidly, stopping halfway through. Ink began forming across the paper. Fresh words, my thoughts. Every sentence I considered appeared instantly on the page. I stepped closer. The book described my hesitation, my fear. Even the exact moment, I noticed my own heartbeat. I tried thinking of something random. The page filled with it immediately. It wasn't predicting. It was recording in real time. Then new lines appeared beneath the present moment. Future sentences. Descriptions of actions I had not yet taken. I read myself stepping backward, and without meaning to, I stepped backward. Pain stabbed sharply through my chest. I gasped. The book reacted. The words adjusted, describing the pain exactly as it happened. I slammed the cover shut. Agony flared again, stronger this time, forcing me to release it. The book reopened eagerly. Pages fluttered like excited breath. The final section lay ahead, blank lines slowly filling themselves. Not yet finished. Still writing. My life continued only because the book had not reached its last page. I backed away carefully. The writing continued even without my touch. The church watched silently as my story advanced toward an ending already waiting. Midnight returned, or perhaps it never left. The brass clock struck 12 again. The bell rang once more. The vibration felt familiar now, settling into bone like an old memory. Then the bell rang again. A second strike. Everything staggered. The air bent sideways. My shadow lagged behind my movement by half a second, stretching unnaturally across the floor. I lifted my hand. The shadow lifted late. Time slipped. A candle extinguished, then relit itself. A pew shifted backward into its previous position. Moments repeated. I watched myself step forward, then watched myself do it again, slightly differently. Two versions of the same action layered together. Memory fractured. I remembered standing near the door. I remembered never leaving the altar. Both felt true. The church reset small pieces of reality repeatedly, searching for a correct version. Each repetition softer than the last. Like practice. Like rehearsal. I pressed my hands against my temples. Multiple memories overlapped. Different conversations, different movements, different outcomes. All belonging to me. All happening now. The bell's echo refused to fade. Time no longer flowed. It adjusted, corrected, and I realized the church was experimenting with moments, deciding which one should remain. The floor moved beneath my feet. At first, I thought it was dizziness from the time distortion. Then the stone lifted slightly and fell again. A slow rhythm. Breathing. Warmth seeped upward through floorboards. The entire church expanded subtly with each pulse. Inhale. Exhale. A seam opened near the center aisle. Stone slid aside, revealing a staircase descending into dim orange glow. Air rose from below, warm, damp, alive. I descended carefully. The walls changed quickly. Stone became smoother, organic. They expanded and contracted slowly, brushing my shoulders like sleeping lungs. The scent was heavy. Earth heat and something enormous resting far below. Each step echoed downward. The breathing paused, waiting, then resumed, deeper now. Something massive slept beneath the church. I felt its awareness brush upward through the structure. Every footstep, I took trigger response. A slower breath, a heavier shift. The walls pulsed stronger, reacting to my presence above it. I stopped moving. The breathing calmed. I stepped again. The structure answered immediately. It knew where I was. The realization settled coldly inside me. The church wasn't built over something. It was connected to it, part of it, and somewhere below, in the warmth and expanding stone, something enormous listened to every step taken in the sanctuary above. The stained glass windows had grown brighter. Moonlight should not have reached them at this angle. Yet pale light poured to the colored panes, washing the church in muted reds and blues. One window drew my attention immediately. A figure filled its center panel. I stepped closer. The air cooled with every step, carrying faint dust and cold metal across my tongue. The face in the glass looked familiar, too familiar. My face, not perfectly drawn but unmistakable. Same eyes, same mouth, same slight tilt of the head. I searched my memory, trying to recall if it had always been there. I knew it hadn't. The expression was calm at first, almost peaceful. Colored light passed through the glass and touched my skin. It felt heavy, judging, as if the light itself weighed something invisible inside me. I looked away. When I looked back, the expression had changed. The mouth tightened, the eyes sharpened. Watching me, a slow dread spread through my chest. Minutes passed. The face continued changing subtly. Sadness, curiosity, disappointment. Then midnight arrived again. The brass clock struck. The bell trembled overhead, and the stained glass blinked. One smooth motion. Lids closing, opening again. I stumbled backward. The church remained silent, accepting the impossibility, without reaction. Light shifted across the floor. The face leaned forward slightly within the glass. Its lips began to move. No voice followed. Only silent words shaped slowly, carefully. I tried reading them. The same phrase repeated again and again. You know. My throat tightened. Recognition settled over me. Not understanding, but certainty that the face knew something I refused to remember. The light intensified briefly, pressing against my eyes until tears formed. When I wiped them away, the face had returned to stillness, expression blank. But I knew it would move again when I stopped watching. The walls began to shift, not physically, visually. Shadows appeared across the stone, faint moving silhouettes layered over reality like old film projected onto dust. At first I thought they were reflections. Then I noticed they moved independently of me. One wall showed a different year. I felt it rather than saw it. People entered through the doors wearing older clothing. Lantern light replaced candles. Snow clung to coats that dissolved seconds later. Another wall displayed a brighter decade. Electric lights humming faintly. Unfamiliar voices murmuring. Time existed simultaneously around me. Each section of wall held a different moment. I walked slowly along the nave, my breath fog in the present, while shadows lived their past lives beside me. Then I saw myself, a shadow version entering the church, another version kneeling near the altar, another standing exactly where I stood now. Some of them turned toward exits. Some never moved again. The realization pressed heavily against my chest. I had entered this church before, many times. Layer versions of me repeated endlessly across the walls, each belonging to a different year or a different attempt. Time inside the church felt thin, stacked like paper sheets barely separated. I reached toward one shadow. My hand passed through cool air, yet a faint sensation lingered, like touching memory itself. The walls continued replaying arrivals, departures, failures. Some versions of me never left at all. And somewhere among those countless recordings, I could not tell which one was real. A voice spoke behind me. Calm, warm, welcome back. I turned immediately. No one stood there. The pews remained filled with unmoving figures. The voice continued, now closer to my ear. I was wondering when you would remember. It came from everywhere at once. Walls, ceiling, floor. Gentle enough to comfort, wrong enough to terrify. The air carried faint incense again, thicker now, wrapping around my lungs. The unseen speaker knew details no stranger should. My childhood street, a forgotten fear, a decision I once regretted but never spoke aloud. Each word landed softly, almost kindly. The tone felt pastoral, protective, like guidance offered during confession. Yet something beneath it felt predatory. "You are safe here," the voice whispered. The promise tightened my chest instead of easing it. I walked backward slowly. The voice followed without moving. "You have always belonged." The congregation remained still, but I sensed agreement spreading silently through them. I asked who was speaking. My own voice sounded small inside the vast nave. No answer came directly. Instead, the church itself creaked gently, with settling like an old body shifting in sleep. The presence lingered close, patient, offering comfort that felt like surrender. I realized the priest did not need a body. The church itself delivered the sermon. My footsteps echoed differently now. Each step produced two sounds. One present, one delayed. I stopped walking. The delayed echo continued anyway. Footsteps replayed across the floor behind me. Perfect copies of movements already made. The church remembered motion. The stone preserved every path taken. Soon more footsteps joined mine. Older ones, heavier ones, some light and hurried, others dragging slowly. I turned. Invisible walkers crossed the aisle beside me, their steps pressing into memory rather than dust. One set sounded wrong. Too heavy, too uneven, not human. The floor corrected my path when I stepped sideways. A sudden resistance pushed gently against my leg, guiding me back into a narrow, invisible route. I tried stepping elsewhere again. The pressure returned stronger. The church restricted movement. Only approved footsteps were allowed. Past mistakes replayed endlessly beneath my feet, correcting direction like a patient teacher. Control slipped away quietly. The building decided where I could walk and where I could not. The chanting began beneath the floor. Low, deep, not heard with ears alone, but felt inside the ribs. I froze. The rhythm matched my heartbeat exactly, each pulse answered by a distant chorus far below. The language meant nothing to me. Syllables older than speech, rising and falling like tides. The floor vibrated gently. Pews shifted a fraction of an inch. Walls leaned subtly, adjusting to the rhythm. The entire church aligned itself with the chant. My heartbeat sped up. The chanting followed instantly. Perfect synchronization. Panic crept upward. I stepped backward. The vibration intensified. Something below responded eagerly. The breathing presence from the basement stirred again, heavier now. Stone flexed under pressure. Dust fell from the ceiling like slow snowfall. The chant grew louder, not louder in volume, but closer, as if rising through layers of earth. The church reshaped itself around the sound, arches tightening, shadows lengthening. It felt like preparation, like anticipation before awakening. I pressed a hand to my chest. The rhythm no longer felt entirely mine. The choir below borrowed it, used it. Something immense strained upward beneath the sanctuary, guided by the hidden hymn. And for the first time since entering, I sensed urgency. Whatever slept beneath the church was beginning to rise. I decided to leave. The thought arrived suddenly, sharp and desperate. The church felt tighter now. Closer, I turned toward the entrance. The doors were gone. Only a blank stone wall waited where they should have been. Cold spread through my hands. I walked quickly down the aisle, scanning every corner. Another doorway appeared near the side chapel, tall wooden, slightly open. Relief rose. I moved toward it. Halfway there, the hallway stretched longer, not gradually. Instantly, the distance doubled, then shifted sideways, pews rearranging themselves in quiet obedience. The door slid farther away without moving. I stopped walking. The windows along the walls showed the outside world, but it was wrong. One revealed snowfall despite the autumn air. Another showed daylight. Another displayed an empty desert beneath a burning sky. None showed the road where I parked. The church resisted departure. I tried another corridor. It curved gently, then sharply, forming angles impossible for the building's size. Soft footsteps echoed behind me, though no one followed. Every time I located an exit, it relocated. Doors exchanged places. Hallways folded inward. The architecture behaved like a living maze adjusting to my intention. Panic settled slowly instead of exploding, because deep down I understood leaving was not part of the design. The church did not trap me violently. It simply refused to agree that I should go. I noticed a mirror only when light struck it, hidden behind a pulpit, tall and narrow, framed in dark wood. It reflected the church incorrectly. The pews were emptier there, the shadows deeper. I stepped closer. My reflection stared back, older. Lines marked my face that I did not yet carry. Hair thinner, eyes tired. I touched my cheek. The reflection hesitated before copying me. A delay, then another change. For a brief moment, I vanished in the mirror entirely. The church remained visible, but I did not exist within it. A hollow space stood where I should have been. My breath quickened. I leaned closer. The reflection returned suddenly. Its lips moved. No sound followed. I watched carefully. The reflection mouthed words urgently. "Don't stay." I staggered backward. The mirror trembled faintly, as if reality itself struggled to maintain agreement between versions. Again the reflection spoke, silently. "Hurry." Then it aged further before my eyes, decades passing in seconds. Shoulders bent, eyes empty. The reflection reached toward me, palm pressed against invisible glass. I lifted my own hand, our fingers nearly aligned. The image flickered, returned to normal. Just me again, still younger, still uncertain. But the warning remained trapped behind the surface. Reality here felt negotiable, and the mirror knew outcomes I had not yet lived. Dust covered the pews thicker than before. I ran my fingers across one absent-mindedly. Letters formed beneath my touch. A name, not mine, someone else's. I moved to another pew. More dust shifted on its own, grains sliding together as if guided by unseen breath. Another name appeared. Then another. Rows filled slowly with identities written by no hand. Some names felt recent, others ancient. A faint memory surfaced. Missing persons reports glimpsed long ago. Faces shown briefly on screens. Several names matched them exactly. My stomach tightened. The church recorded attendance differently than the ledger. I watched closely. Dust stirred again. Particles lifted, rearranging carefully. A new name formed while I stood there. Fresh, still settling. The realization arrived gently but completely. These were people who entered, people who never truly left. I stepped back. The dust on the nearest pew shifted once more. Letters curved slowly into place. My name, perfectly spelled. The grain stopped moving. Silence followed. The church had acknowledged me permanently. The lights dimmed, not extinguished, lowered, like eyelids closing halfway. A deep stillness spread through the structure. The church felt asleep, walls repositioned subtly, sliding a fraction of an inch at a time. Pews adjusted angles without sound. Shadows drifted like wandering thoughts. I stood perfectly still. Moving felt dangerous. Reality softened around me, edges blurring slightly as if the building dreamed without fully disconnecting from wakefulness. A hallway appeared where none existed moments before, then faded. The ceiling lowered, then returned. The church rearranged itself the way a sleeping mind reshapes memory. I realized something terrifying. Dreams forget details. If the church dreamed incorrectly, it might remember me wrong. My hands looked unfamiliar for a moment. Longer fingers altered shape before settling back into normal form. Panic rose quietly. I forced myself to remain still, hoping not to disturb its sleep. The building breathed slowly. Every shift felt subconscious, accidental. I was inside something imagining itself. And if it woke, without remembering me properly, I might cease to exist in the version that followed. The hymn returned, soft at first, barely audible, a looping melody drifting through every corner of the church. It repeated endlessly, each repetition slightly different. Notes rearranged, tempo altered just enough to feel unfamiliar. I listened. The melody felt important, comforting. Then I forgot why I was listening. A blankness slipped into my thoughts. I shook my head, trying to focus. The hymn began again. Another variation. A memory disappeared quietly. I struggled to recall how I arrived here. The reason blurred. The melody continued looping, polishing away fragments of identity with every cycle. Panic rose. I covered my ears. The hymn remained inside my mind anyway. Lyrics surfaced faintly beneath the melody. Hidden warnings encoded between notes. Remember the beginning. The phrase repeated softly beneath each variation. I searched my memory desperately. The road, the fog, the first sight of the church. Holding on to those images felt like gripping a rope over an endless drop. The hymn restarted again. Another fragment slipped away. I nearly forgot my own name. I whispered it repeatedly, grounding myself. The melody hesitated slightly, as if frustrated. I understood then. Escape required remembering how it began. The church erased memory to keep visitors from retracing their path outward. I clung to the earliest image I could hold. Headlights cutting through fog. An unmapped church appearing where none should exist. The hymn softened. Not gone. Waiting. Looping patiently for the moment I forgot again. The windows darkened. Not with night. With stillness. I approached slowly. Breath shallow. Palms cold against a wooden frame. Figures stood outside. Dozens of them. Perfectly still. They surrounded the church at impossible distances. Some close enough to touch the glass. Others far across fields that stretched farther than the land should allow. Rain fell beyond the window, yet none of it touched them. Drops passed through their bodies without disturbance. Snow drifted in another window. Sunlight burned through another. Different weather existed simultaneously outside each pane. But the figures never moved. They stood frozen between moments. I noticed something worse. The same figure appeared in multiple windows at once. One man stood near the north wall, and again beside the entrance, and again far across the field. Identical posture, identical gaze. Outside time, watching. One figure raise an arm, slowly, not moving through motion, but changing positions between blinks. The hand lifted and pointed directly at me. The gesture felt heavy, like reality bending around intention. The church shifted. A pew slid slightly behind me. A candle extinguished. The pointing changed something fundamental. I stepped back. The figure remained motionless. Finger extended forever. The congregation outside did not enter. They did not leave. They simply existed, waiting for time to reach them again. And I understood, with quiet dread, they were not standing outside the church. They were standing outside time itself. The floor opened again without warning. Stones separating silently beneath my feet. Another staircase revealed itself, but this one felt different. Colder. Wrong. I descended carefully. Each step mirrored one above it perfectly. The architecture below resembled the church exactly, but reversed. The altar stood where the entrance should be. Pews faced backward. Candles burned downward. Flames pointing toward the floor. Even gravity felt uncertain. I walked slowly through the mirrored sanctuary. Every movement felt delayed, like walking through memory instead of space. Then I saw someone entering through the opposite doors. Myself. The other version moved calmly, stepping inside with cautious curiosity, the same way I had when first arriving. I watched myself approach the pews. Pause. Look around. The scene unfolded in reverse order. Events replayed backward. I saw myself leaving, then entering again, moments folding over each other. Reality layered until directions lost meaning. The two churches overlapped slightly, one correcting the other. I reached toward my mirrored self. The figure turned its head suddenly and looked directly at me. Recognition flickered. Then both realities trembled violently. The walls blurred. The lower church faded. I stumbled upward instinctively. When I reached the sanctuary again, the opening had vanished, but the feeling remained. The church existed twice, and both versions were slowly collapsing into one. A new light appeared. No candle, no lamp, just illumination forming in midair near the ceiling. Soft white at first, then brighter. It revealed corners I had never noticed. Movement stirred there. Shadows detached from walls briefly before slipping back into place. The light exposed things I preferred darkness. Shapes crouched where emptiness should have been. They vanished when I focused on them directly. The illumination reacted to my thoughts. When fear rose, the light intensified. When I tried calming myself, it dimmed slightly. The church became too visible. Every imperfection revealed. Every watching presence unable to hide. I realized something disturbing. Darkness had protected me. The light removed that protection. Shadows began moving independently of their sources. One crossed the aisle without any body attached. Another climbed a wall against gravity. My own shadow hesitated before following me. The brightness felt invasive. I stepped backward into dimmer space. Relief followed instantly. The darker areas felt safer, gentler. The light pulsed once more, searching for my attention. I turned away deliberately, refusing to look. Behind me, unseen movement continued, and for the first time, I preferred not knowing what shared the church with me. Midnight arrived again. The clock struck 12, but the minute never passed. The second hand trembled endlessly between numbers. The bell rang. Its echo never faded. Every sound repeated with delay. My footsteps followed me twice. My breathing returned seconds after I exhaled. Time folded inward. I stood trapped inside one unfinished moment. Candles flickered repeatedly through the same motion. The congregation adjusted endlessly, restarting tiny movements over and over. Completion approached. I felt it. The church prepared itself carefully, like a ritual nearing its final step. The hymn began faintly beneath everything, not repeating now, resolving. The unfinished lyric from the choir returned to my mind, the one describing my death. The pause lingered, waiting for conclusion. The walls brightened softly. The congregation turned toward me completely for the first time. Every face aligned, expectant, not hostile, not welcoming, simply ready. Terror faded strangely. Acceptance replaced it, because resistance no longer made sense. Midnight held me gently, but firmly. The church did not rush. It allowed the moment to stretch forever, until I understood my role within it. The bell continued ringing without end, and I realized midnight was not a time. It was a destination. The memory returned quietly, like waking from a dream already lived many times. I remembered leaving, walking out through the doors, driving away beneath morning light, telling myself the night had ended, but those memories felt thin, incorrect, because I was still here, always had been. Every hallway I escaped through curved back inward. Every sunrise faded into another midnight. The chapters of my experience were not progress. They were loops, different paths through the same night. The church did not exist in a location. It existed in memory, inside recollection itself. Each time I thought I left, I simply forgot I remained. The congregation shifted around me, no longer strangers. Their stillness felt familiar now, comforting. I walked slowly toward an empty pew. Dust lifted as I sat. My movement felt rehearsed, natural, expected. Across the nave, another traveler entered through the doors, confused, breathing quickly, looking around exactly as I once had. I watched them notice the unmapped church, the shifting architecture, the silent congregation. Recognition settled gently over me. I understood why no one had spoken, why no one moved. We were not prisoners. We were witnesses, participants in an endless arrival. The bell rang softly overhead. The ledger opened near the altar. A pen lifted into the air. The newcomer stepped forward hesitantly. Their name began writing itself. I felt no fear now, only stillness, only belonging. My hands rested calmly in my lap. Breathing slowed, blinking unnecessary. The church breathed with me, or perhaps I breathed with it. The traveler glanced toward the pews. Our eyes almost met. I remained perfectly still, waiting, just as the others once waited for me. Outside, fog pressed gently against stained glass. Inside, midnight continued forever, and somewhere in the distance, another visitor was already on the road, approaching a church that should not exist.